The night I found my signature on a document I never signed, I knew something was terribly wrong. It wasn't a stranger who betrayed me. It was the woman sleeping just down the hall, my husband's sister. And by the time I confronted her, the damage was already done. When my husband's sister moved into our home, I thought I was doing the right thing, helping family, being generous. But kindness, I've learned, can sometimes invite your own undoing. I remember the night she arrived. It was raining, not a heavy storm, but that kind of steady, whispering drizzle that lingers for hours. The air smelled of wet soil and new beginnings. I was in the kitchen, setting down 2 extra plates on the table, one for her and one for the hope that she and I would grow close. Her name was Nora, and she was my husband, Daniel's, younger sister by 8 years. She had just gotten a job in the city, and when Daniel told me she needed a place to stay, just for a few months, I didn't hesitate. I wanted to believe good intentions would bring good outcomes. She arrived with 2 suitcases, a bright smile, and a kind of restless energy, the kind that fills a room before you even notice it. "It feels like a fresh start," she said, dropping her bags near the entryway. I smiled. Fresh starts are good. Back then, I didn't know what kind of start it would really be. Our home sat at the edge of a quiet suburb, not fancy but comfortable. We'd worked hard for it. Daniel was a contractor, I taught part-time at a preschool, and together we'd spent years saving every spare dollar for that house. It was our pride, the symbol of everything we'd built together. The first few weeks with Nora were fine. She was polite, even sweet. Every morning I'd hear her heels click on the kitchen tiles as she rushed out the door, clutching a travel mug of coffee. Sometimes she'd bring flowers for the dining table or cook dinner when I worked late. She had this way of making you feel seen, remembering what kind of tea you liked, laughing at your stories, asking about your day. "Your sister's adjusting well," I said to Daniel one evening as we sat watching TV. He smiled. "Yeah, she's trying. After what she went through with that breakup, she deserves a soft landing." I nodded. I knew about her ex, a man who had drained her emotionally and financially. Maybe I saw a bit of myself in her. I'd had rough beginnings too, and I wanted her to feel safe here. But slowly, little things started to shift. At first it was subtle. A bank statement left open on the kitchen counter. A question about our mortgage. A comment about how smart it was that Daniel had put both our names on the deed. She'd say it casually, but her tone lingered. A softness wrapping around a hidden edge. I brushed it off. Family talks about money all the time, right? Then, one night, while washing dishes, I overheard her speaking to Daniel in the living room. Her voice was low, almost gentle. "Danny," she said, the nickname only she used, "you really should manage the bills. Maya's already so busy. You don't want her stressing about finances." I froze. I could hear Daniel chuckle, the kind of easy, dismissive laugh that said he didn't think much of it, but my chest tightened anyway. I wasn't controlling with money. Daniel and I shared everything equally. We had systems, trust, balance. But the way she said it, like I wasn't capable, made something inside me twitch. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling fan spinning in slow, hypnotic circles. My mind wouldn't stop asking, why? Why did she say that? Why now? The next morning, she made pancakes. "Morning, Maya," she chirped, flipping a golden round onto my plate. "I was just thinking, maybe we could do a little home upgrade. The kitchen could use a new backsplash. Daniel's good with his hands, right?" I smiled thinly. "We just finished paying off the renovation loan last year." "Oh," she hesitated, then said lightly, "Well, you can always refinance, Interest rates are good right now." It was said casually, but again, that tone, that strange, suggestive tone, that felt too informed, too intentional. When she left her work, I checked the mail. Among the usual bills and flyers was an envelope from our bank, addressed to both me and Daniel. I opened it without thinking. Inside was a letter confirming a new joint inquiry for refinancing options. My breath caught. I hadn't requested it. My fingers tightened around the paper, smearing a small spot of ink. My dad must have done it. Or had he? That evening, when I asked him about it, he looked confused. He said, "I didn't talk to the bank. Why?" I held out the letter. "This came today." He frowned. "Maybe it's an automated thing. I'll call tomorrow." But I saw the way his eyes darted briefly towards the hallway, where Nora's shoes were neatly lined up. A week later, I noticed something else. Daniel had started discussing money differently, more cautious, more withdrawn. He'd always shared details. We both handled bills, saved receipts. But now, when I asked simple things like, "Did the mortgage payment clear?" he'd say, "Yeah, it's handled." Just that. Handled. Handled by who? I tried not to spiral. I told myself maybe I was being paranoid, overprotective of our space. She was family. She'd only been here a month. But one afternoon, while folding laundry in the guest room, her room, I noticed her desk door slightly open. A few envelopes peeked out, one with our mortgage company's logo. I opened it without thinking. Inside were several documents, refinance printouts, home appraisal forms, and one handwritten list with our names Maya and Daniel underlined. Next to them, she'd written equity, potential split, transfer of title, if investment, lawyer referral, ask D later. My heart pounded so loud I could hear it in my ears. I felt dizzy, like the ground under my feet had shifted. A cold realization swept over me. She wasn't just helping. She was planning something. Something that had to do with our home. That night, I couldn't eat. The curry I'd cooked went cold on my plate. Nora noticed. "You okay?" she asked, her voice soft, sweet. "Just tired," I said. But my eyes stayed on her. She smiled, reached across the table, and said, "You've built such a beautiful home here, Maya. You and Daniel make it look so easy. Maybe one day I'll have something like this." The way she said "something like this" made my stomach twist. I excused myself early that night, went to bed, and lay there staring at the dark outline of the ceiling. Whatever was happening, whatever she was doing, I knew I had to find out. But I also knew, when it came to family, truth was never simple. The next morning, I woke up before dawn. The sky outside was still dark, the street lamps casting long, tired shadows across the yard. Daniel was asleep beside me, his breathing steady and slow. I stared at the faint light filtering through the curtains and tried to quiet the pounding in my chest. Was I imagining all of it? Maybe I'd misread those documents. Maybe Nora was just helping Daniel look into financial options. But then, why hide it? Why keep it in her drawer? I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. When I came down to the kitchen, I found her already there, hair tied up, a neat blazer on, sipping coffee like she owned the place. "Morning," she said brightly. "You're up early?" "Couldn't sleep." She smiled. "Too much on your mind?" Her question felt loaded. I forced a polite smile. "Just work stuff." She nodded sympathetically. "You should let Daniel handle more of the bills and paperwork, you know? Men like feeling useful." There it was again, that subtle push. Gentle, smiling, but invasive. I poured my coffee, pretending not to notice.
That weekend, Daniel had to go out of town for 2 days, a construction site meeting up north. Nora insisted on staying home, saying she needed a quiet weekend to sort out some personal paperwork. I tried not to read into it, but by Saturday evening, the tension was unbearable. After dinner, she disappeared into her room with her laptop. I sat in the living room, pretending to watch TV while listening to the faint clicking of her keyboard. Around midnight, I heard her door open. I waited until she went to bed, then crept down the hallway. Her door was slightly ajar, light from her desk lamp spilling onto the carpet. My hands trembled as I peeked inside. On the desk, there were scattered pages, legal documents, spreadsheets, and an email draft open on her laptop screen. I moved closer and read the words, "If Daniel agrees to add my name as a co-investor, we can proceed with the partial equity transfer next quarter." My stomach dropped. Co-investor. Equity transfer. Our home. My home. I scrolled down and saw an attachment titled Revised Title Agreement Draft. A sound escaped me. A small, sharp gasp. I closed my eyes and stepped back, afraid I'd wake her. But she stirred slightly in bed, muttering something in her sleep. I slipped out of the room and stood in the hallway, heart racing so hard it hurt. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat on the couch, staring at the framed wedding photo on the mantel. Me and Daniel, smiling under a sunset sky, the house behind us barely finished. Our dream. And now, someone under our roof was scheming to take it. By morning, I decided I needed proof. When Daniel came home Sunday evening, I met him at the door. "Can we talk?" I asked. He looked tired, dust on his boots, but he smiled. "Sure, babe. Everything okay?" "Not really." We sat at the kitchen table. I slid my phone toward him. On it was a photo I'd taken of the laptop screen, the email draft, and title document. He frowned. "What's this?" "That's what your sister was working on while you were gone." He blinked, confused. "Nora, no, that can't be. She doesn't know anything about our mortgage stuff." I thought so too. But she's been asking questions and she's already contacted someone about an equity transfer. He rubbed his temples, sighing. "Maya, come on, you're reading too much into this. Maybe she's just researching investment stuff for herself." I swallowed hard. "Then why does that email mention our names and this house?" He didn't answer right away. The silence stretched long between us, heavy and sharp. Finally, he said quietly, "Maybe she misunderstood something I said. I did mention refinancing once." "Daniel," I said, voice trembling, "this isn't a misunderstanding. She's trying to get involved in our property." He looked at me, uncertainty flickering in his eyes. "She wouldn't do that." I felt anger rise, hot and bitter. "You always defend her, but what if this time she is crossing a line?" He sighed. "I'll talk to her tomorrow." I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe he'd see what I saw. But deep down, I knew. He wouldn't. Not right away. That night, I heard muffled voices down the hall. Daniel had gone into Nora's room. I didn't mean to listen, but their voices carried through the thin walls. He said, "Why would you even look into that?" Frustration creeping into his tone. Her voice, smooth as honey. "I was just trying to help. You said you two were tight on money after that roof repair. I thought maybe you could use an investor. Family helping family. By putting your name on our house? I didn't say that. It was just an idea." Her voice cracked slightly, a practiced tremor. I could picture it, her eyes wide, feigning innocence. Daniel said something too low for me to hear. Then the door clicked shut. Moments later, I heard her crying, loud enough for me to hear through the walls. I didn't go to her. I just sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the empty doorway, feeling the walls of my home press closer. The next morning, Daniel avoided me. He made coffee, packed his bag, and left for work early. Nora came into the kitchen, puffy-eyed, clutching a tissue. "Daniel told me you think I'm trying to steal your house," she said softly. "I think you've been making plans that don't concern you." Her lip quivered. "You've never liked me, have you?" "That's not true," I said, though my voice trembled. "I welcomed you here." "Welcomed me? You've been watching me like a hawk since day one. You don't trust me, Maya. That's the real issue." She turned and walked away before I could answer, leaving me there, heart pounding, anger and sadness twisting together inside me. That evening, Daniel called to say he'd be late. He said, "big client meeting." But when I looked out the window around 8, I saw his truck parked at the end of the street, engine off, lights out. He was sitting there alone, phone pressed to his ear, talking quietly. And then the passenger door opened. Nora slipped inside. My breath hitched. I watched as she reached for his hand. He didn't pull away. The air inside me shattered.
I stood there in the dark, the curtain edge clutched between my fingers, watching my husband and his sister sitting in that car like two conspirators. The night was silent except for the faint hum of the truck engine and the chirping of crickets. My heart thudded so hard that I could feel the pulse in my throat. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but I could see the shape of their conversation. Her leaning forward, his head bowed, her hand brushing his arm as if she was comforting him. And then she reached for him again, slower this time, her palm resting on his shoulder. He didn't move away. Something inside me cracked quietly, not with rage, but with a deep, hollow ache. I didn't want to imagine the worst. I wanted to believe it was just a misunderstanding, that he was consoling her, that she was crying again, that I was seeing what pain wanted me to see. But when he finally started the engine and drove away with her in the passenger seat, I knew. Whatever was happening between them had gone far beyond family boundaries. He came home close to midnight. The headlights swept briefly across the living room where I sat waiting, the shadows crawling over the walls. When he stepped in, his expression was a mix of exhaustion and guilt. "You're still up?" he asked, avoiding my eyes. "Where were you?" "I told you, work meeting ran late." "Funny," I said softly, "because I saw you out on the street in your truck with Nora." He froze. The silence that followed was so thick, I could hear the faint ticking of the kitchen clock behind me. "Maya?" he started, but I held up my hand. "No, don't lie. I saw her get into the car." He exhaled slowly, pressing his palms against the table. "We were just talking. She was upset. You've been accusing her of things, and she feels cornered." "Upset? She's been plotting behind my back, Daniel, and now you're sneaking off with her at night?" He ran a hand over his face, the way he always did when he didn't want to answer. "Nothing happened," he said finally, his voice low. I stared at him. "That's not the point. You chose her side over mine again." He didn't reply. He just sank into the chair across from me, looking smaller than I'd ever seen him. "Do you even realize what she's doing? She's isolating you. She's been controlling the narrative since she moved in." "Maya, she's my sister. She's had a hard time. You don't know what she's been through." I laughed, a brittle, broken sound. "And you don't know what I'm going through, living under the same roof as a woman who's trying to dismantle everything we built." He flinched, like my words had landed physically, but he didn't deny it. He didn't even look at me. That was worse than any argument, that quiet retreat into guilt. The next few days passed in a fog. We barely spoke. Meals were silent. The house felt divided, my side, her side, and Daniel hovering somewhere in the middle, lost. Then one afternoon, while Daniel was at work, a courier came. A thick brown envelope addressed to Mr. and Mrs. Daniel Reed. I signed for it, my name trembling as I scrawled it across the page. When I opened it, my stomach turned. Inside were documents from a property law firm, a draft agreement with joint equity partner Miss Nora Reed, typed in bold. My name was there, too, listed under current owner. But next to it was a new clause, pending voluntary consent of both parties to partial title transfer. Voluntary consent! I felt sick. She was making it official, pushing the idea into motion. And Daniel must have been involved even if he hadn't fully understood it. I called him right then, my voice shaking. "Daniel, we need to talk, now." He sighed on the other end. "I'm in the middle of something. About the house." "What about it?" "I just received a draft agreement from a law firm with Nora's name on it." "What?" He sounded startled, but I couldn't tell if it was genuine or not. "I'm done pretending," I said, my voice low, firm. "You come home right now, or I'll go to that firm myself." He said nothing for a few seconds, then hung up. When he walked in 30 minutes later, Nora was with him. They both looked tense, defensive, like they'd rehearsed whatever was about to happen. "Before you say anything," she began, "I can explain." I crossed my arms. "Please do." "It was just a draft, a proposal for future investment. I never submitted it. I was trying to show Daniel how I could help build equity in the family. You've both been struggling with the mortgage, and I thought—" "Stop," I said, sharp. "You thought you could insert yourself into a marriage that isn't yours." Her eyes flashed. "I'm trying to help." "Help? By talking to lawyers behind our backs? By sneaking into my husband's truck at night?" Daniel flinched, guilt flickering across his face. Her lips parted in mock shock. "You were spying on us?" "I live here," I said coldly. "Nothing happens under this roof without me noticing." She looked at Daniel, tears forming, that same manipulative softness she wore like perfume. "See, this is what I mean. She doesn't trust anyone, not even you." Daniel stood between us now, his voice shaking. "Enough, both of you." But I could see the war behind his eyes, the pull between loyalty and truth. I reached for the envelope on the table and shoved it toward him. "This is what your sister's been doing. This is the proof." He opened it, scanning the papers, his face drained of color. "Nora, you actually contacted a law firm?" Her voice cracked. "It was just an idea, Daniel. You said you wanted to make the house an investment." "I didn't mean this." He threw the papers down, his voice rising for the first time. The silence that followed was deafening. She started to cry, small sobs that filled the room, but for once Daniel didn't rush to comfort her. He just stared at the documents, his jaw tight, shoulders heavy. I felt no satisfaction, only a strange, exhausted sorrow. Because even in that moment of truth, I could tell something between us had already broken. That night, Nora packed her bags. Daniel didn't stop her, and neither did I. She said nothing as she left except one quiet sentence at the door. "You'll regret this, Maya. You've made him choose." Then she was gone, the echo of her footsteps fading into the wet night. But what she said lingered long after she left, because she was right about one thing. I had made him choose, and I wasn't sure who he'd choose tomorrow.
The house felt eerily quiet after she left. No sound of her slippers on the kitchen tiles,
No faint hum of her music from the guest room, no perfume lingering in the hallway. Only the silence. Thick, uneasy, heavy with what was left unsaid. Daniel barely spoke to me that night. He sat in the living room for hours, staring at the wall, the envelope still lying open on the coffee table. When I brought him a glass of water, he didn't even look up. "She's gone," I said softly. He nodded, eyes distant. "Yeah." I waited for something. An apology, an explanation, a sigh, something. But he just sat there, lost in his thoughts. I wanted to be angry, to shout, to tell him how betrayed I felt. But I was too tired. Anger requires energy, and that night, I didn't have any left. I went to bed alone. The sheets felt cold, and for the first time in years, I realized how lonely it can be to lie next to someone who's no longer truly beside you. Days turned into weeks. Nora's absence should have been a relief, but instead, it left a hollow echo in our lives. Every time the phone buzzed, I wondered if it was her. Every time Daniel stepped out, I wondered if he was going to see her. He said he wasn't, and I believed him. But belief, once cracked, never feels whole again. He tried to reach out in small ways. He'd make coffee for me in the mornings, the way he used to. He'd ask how my day was, his tone careful, tentative. But I could sense the guilt hanging between us, unspoken but alive. One evening, about 2 weeks after she left, he came home early. He stood in the doorway looking almost boyish in his hesitation. "Maya, can we talk?" he said quietly. I set down the dish towel and nodded. He took a deep breath. "I need to be honest with you," he began. "I knew Nora had ideas about the house, but I didn't think she'd go that far. I thought it was just her talking. You know how she dreams big, always trying to sound capable." I said nothing. He rubbed the back of his neck, eyes flicking to the floor. "She told me she wanted to invest, to feel like part of the family. I told her no, that it was our home, not hers. But I didn't tell you because I didn't want you to think I was taking her side again." I looked at him, my throat tight. "But by hiding it, you did exactly that." He nodded slowly. "Yeah." The silence stretched between us. I could see the shame in his face, the way his shoulders slumped, the way he couldn't hold my gaze. "He should have protected you," he said quietly, "not her. You've always been the one holding this house together, and I let her drive a wedge between us." It was the first time he had said anything like that. For a moment, I almost cried, not from sadness, but from relief. Still, part of me couldn't let go of the image of that night. Him in the car with her hand on his shoulder, the closeness that had no business existing. Did she ever try to come between us? More than just the money? I asked. He hesitated, and that hesitation told me everything. "She flirted," he admitted. I ignored it. I thought it would pass. "Did you ever?" "No," he said firmly, meeting my eyes. "Never. But I should have stopped it the moment it began." For a while, we both just stood there, two people surrounded by the wreckage of something we'd both neglected. Finally, I said, "I can forgive you, Daniel, but I can't pretend this didn't happen. We need to rebuild. From the ground up." He nodded. "I'll do whatever it takes." I started small. I changed the locks, not out of fear, but as a symbolic act. A fresh start, a new boundary.
I cleaned out the guest room, boxed up what Nora had left behind, clothes, books, the half-empty bottle of perfume she'd kept on the dresser. When I reached the bottom drawer, I found a small notebook. At first, I thought it was just a planner, but when I opened it, I froze. Inside were pages filled with notes, calculations, plans, names of property agents, and on one page, scrawled in her looping handwriting, were the words, "He'll see reason once Maya's out of the way." My heart stopped. I sat down slowly, the notebook trembling in my hands. So it hadn't been paranoia. She had written it, black and white proof of her intent. I didn't show it to Daniel right away. I didn't want another explosion of guilt or tears. I just needed time. Time to process, to decide what forgiveness actually meant. That night, I hid the notebook in my bedside drawer. Not as revenge, but as a reminder. A record of how easily love can be tested and how close we came to losing everything. A few days later, I finally told Daniel about the notebook. He read it in silence, jaw tight, eyes dark. "She really wrote this," he murmured. I nodded. "I don't think she ever meant to physically hurt me, but she wanted me out, emotionally, financially, however she could." He closed the notebook gently. "She won't come near us again. I'll make sure of it." And for once, I believed him. There was a firmness in his tone, a clarity I hadn't heard in months. We talked for hours that night, not just about Nora, but about us, about how far we'd drifted, about the silence we'd allowed to grow like mold between us. He held my hand across the table and said, "I lost sight of what mattered. I let family loyalty blind me. But I know now, home isn't walls or equity, it's you." And in that moment, I felt something fragile, but real, begin to heal. The days that followed were gentler. We laughed again, carefully, like two people learning to speak after years of silence. We cooked together. We even started saving for a small trip, something just for us. But sometimes, late at night, when the wind moved through the empty guest room, I'd think of her, of how close she came to taking everything, and of how easily love can be twisted by the people we let too close. Still, I didn't regret letting her stay, because through her betrayal, I learned where my boundaries end and where my strength begins.
2 months after Nora left, peace started to return, or at least something close to it. The house was quieter, lighter, as though it had finally exhaled after holding its breath too long. But I knew it wasn't over. Secrets never stay buried forever. Not in families, not in neighborhoods. It started with a phone call from Daniel's mother. She rarely called me directly. She usually spoke to Daniel, but that afternoon her name flashed across my screen. I hesitated before answering. "Maya," she said, her voice clipped. "Is it true that Nora moved out?" I swallowed. Yes, she needed some space. Silence hummed through the line for a moment. Then she sighed. "I know Nora has been having trouble with money, but I've heard other things, from your cousin-in-law. Something about her wanting a part of your house?" I could feel my pulse in my neck. "Who told you that?" "Doesn't matter who," she said softly. "I just need to know if it's true." For a second, I thought about lying. It would have been easier to sweep it under the rug, pretend everything was fine. But something inside me had changed. I was done hiding things to protect appearances. "It's true," I said. "She tried to manipulate things between me and Daniel. She even forged my signature." A gasp. "She what?" I explained, carefully, calmly, the way she had meddled with our finances, the way Daniel and I had discovered the truth.
When I finished, there was only silence. Then, in a voice filled with sorrow, she whispered, "Oh, Nora." "I'm not calling to stir trouble," I said, "but you asked, and I believe in being honest." "I understand." Her tone was different now, subdued, shaken. "Thank you for telling me the truth." That conversation spread faster than I could have imagined. Within a week, Daniel's older brother called, then their aunt, then even Nora herself, one night around midnight. "Why are you telling people lies about me?" she hissed. I took a breath, trying to keep my tone even. "I didn't lie, Nora. I told your mother the truth." Her voice rose. "You're making me look like a thief. You're ruining my life." "I didn't ruin your life, Nora," I said quietly. "You did that when you forged my signature and lied to your brother." There was a sharp inhale on the other end of the line, then silence. When she finally spoke, her voice was smaller, almost trembling. "I just wanted to be independent," she muttered. "I didn't mean for it to go that far." I closed my eyes. "You could have asked for help. We would have helped you. You didn't have to manipulate anyone." She didn't respond. "I hope," I said softly, "you find what you're looking for. But don't ever use family to get it." Then I hung up. It wasn't dramatic. There were no tears, no screaming, just finality. The kind that comes when you stop waiting for an apology that will never sound the way you want it to. In the weeks that followed, Daniel's family grew quieter around us. No one took sides openly, but there was a shift, a mix of pity and respect in how they spoke to me now. At a family gathering in late spring, his mother hugged me for the first time in years. "Thank you for protecting my son," she whispered, even when he didn't see what was happening. It wasn't just forgiveness, it was acknowledgement, and it meant more than I could put into words. Life settled into a new rhythm. Daniel and I started therapy, not because we were broken, but because we wanted to stay whole. We learned how to talk again, really talk, not about logistics or bills, but about fear, trust, and everything in between. Sometimes we'd sit on the porch after dinner, the air thick with the scent of jasmine from the garden, and just exist, quietly, peacefully. He once said, "I used to think protecting my family meant keeping the peace. Now I realize it means facing the storm before it hits." I smiled and said, "And I used to think love meant forgiveness at all costs. Now I know it means setting boundaries, even with people you care about." We were both still healing, but we were healing together. One afternoon, months later, I received a letter in the mail. No return address, just my name written in delicate, familiar handwriting. I knew before I opened it that it was from her. Inside the note was short. "Maya, I'm sorry for everything. I was angry at life, not at you. I hope you and Daniel are happy. N. Nora." No excuses, no requests. Just that. I sat on the porch, the sunlight warm on my hands, and read it 3 times. Part of me wanted to throw it away. But instead, I folded it gently and placed it inside the same drawer where I'd kept her old notebook. It was a reminder that even broken relationships can end in quiet understanding. Over time, I stopped checking the guest room door before bed. I stopped wondering if the phone calls were about her. The house felt like ours again, lived in, steady, full of the kind of peace that comes from surviving something together. Daniel began planting herbs outside the kitchen window. Basil, rosemary, mint. He said he wanted to fill the house with new scents, to overwrite the past. I loved that. Sometimes I still think of her, not with anger anymore, but with something close to pity, because I've realized this: some people will test your kindness, not because they want to hurt you, but because they don't know how to love without taking. And that's not something you can fix for them. When I tell this story now, I don't tell it with bitterness. I tell it with gratitude, Because that year, I learned that generosity without boundaries becomes self-betrayal. That forgiveness doesn't mean letting someone back in. Sometimes it means letting yourself move on. And that the real strength of a marriage isn't how perfect it looks from the outside, but how it holds together after the storm.
Sometimes I sit by the window in the evenings, watching the sun fade behind the houses on our street. The light touches everything for just a moment before it disappears. The trees, the fence, even the edge of our roof. And then the world slips quietly into shadow. That's how life feels too sometimes. Bright and safe one minute, uncertain and fragile the next. When I let Nora into our home, I did it out of love because I believed that family always meant safety, trust, loyalty. But I learned that love, when left unguarded, can become the easiest thing for someone to take advantage of. I used to think setting boundaries meant being cold. Now I know it's an act of love for yourself and for the people you're trying to protect. There's a kind of peace that comes after betrayal, a quiet strength that only grows once you stop trying to fix everyone else's mess and start tending to your own heart. And even though what she did hurt me deeply, I've chosen to keep the door of forgiveness slightly open, not for her to walk back through, but so that light can still come in. Because bitterness is heavy, and I've carried enough weight for one lifetime. So, if you're listening to this and you've ever opened your heart or your home only to be hurt by someone you trusted, please remember this. You are not foolish for caring. You are not weak for forgiving. You are simply human, learning where love ends and self-respect begins. And as for me, I've learned that peace doesn't always mean everyone gets along. Sometimes it just means learning to live without fear in your own house again. Would you have done what I did? Would you have let her stay? Tell me what you think in the comments. And if my story resonated with you, don't forget to subscribe, because sometimes the hardest stories to tell are the ones that heal us the most.